Welcome to the Mavs Fans for Life podcast. I'm Landon Thomas, joined by my co-host Shahnavaz and Makhani. Shahnavaz, this episode we will talk about Jason Kidd getting his flowers.
Yeah.
We don't do it often, but when he does good, we applaud what he's doing. So I feel like it's a good time doing that within the 7-1 stretch in the last 8 games. And then we'll talk about Luka's MVP campaign resuming. Every time they get in 6th seed, we talk about his MVP campaign because it needs to be talked about, especially this late in the season. So, Shahnavaz, the Mavs are coming off a win over the Utah Jazz. Well, last time we talked, they were 3-1 last week, and now they are 3-0. They played the Nuggets, they played the Spurs, and they played the Jazz since our last podcast episode. So 3-0.
3-0.
It's a big week coming up. You're playing the Jazz again, and then also the Kings games. So, Shahnavaz, what have you seen from Jason Kidd specifically, and then also what he's doing with this team?
At least from Jason Kidd, I mean, he's kind of shored up the rotations, which I know has been kind of the biggest issue, with Mavs fans. And also, just as you watch the game, you can kind of tell who's struggling and who's not struggling. And, you've seen Tim Hardaway Jr.'s minutes decrease kind of all of a sudden. I think the reemergence and getting Dante Exum back from injury, I think helps that a lot because Mavericks are pretty shorthanded without Exum. I don't know if the trust is there for a guy like Jaden Hardy yet, although we did see him play quite a bit against Utah yesterday and played well. So it'll be interesting to see if he kind of gets a little bit more run, as the season kind of goes, continues. And, the Mavericks should get Josh Green back before the end of the year. So I think you'll see potentially Hardaway's minutes kind of come down a little bit. And I think even in some situations with playing Maxey, you can play him at the 4, which is kind of, more of a preferred spot for him. But sometimes the small ball lineup, like depending on matchups, I think he's done a really good job of really executing when to put Maxey in the game. You saw it in the Denver game. I mean, outside of kind of that last shot by Jamal Murray, Maxey was pretty good in that game. I mean, his shot wasn't falling until last night against Utah, but defensively, I mean, we know what he brings to the table. And especially with guys like Gafford and Lively, and all credit to Derek Lively because he held his own against Nikola Jokic, in that Denver game. But they have trouble sometimes. We've seen it against stretch bigs and bigs that can kind of shoot outside. So to be able to have a guy like Maxey and for Kidd to really understand how to deploy him and use him in certain situations, I think it's been great over this, these last 8 games. And finally, just strategically, Landon, I mean, I think you saw it last night with the 18 dunks, the most in Mavericks history against Utah, which was just crazy. I think strategically, like understanding and getting the team to buy into getting into the paint more and really to attack, use their strength. I mean, I think you tweeted this out that the Mavericks have not been shooting the 3 well the last 10 games, which it was a recipe for disaster earlier this year, even last year. But some of these games now, the San Antonio game, you can have Luka go 6 of 26 or whatever he did and still come out with a win. Not a pretty one, but hey, a win is a win. I'll take it, And the fact that now you look at statistically, the Mavericks are second in the NBA in the last 8 games in paint touches. They lead the NBA, they're second in the NBA in paint field goal percentage at almost 79%, and they lead the NBA in paint points per game in this last 8 games. So they're using their strength of Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively and even Luka and Kyrie getting into the paint when the three's not falling, and that's something that was troublesome for this team earlier, but they've really picked up the pace, and a lot of that I think has to do with Jason Kidd and the adjustments that he's made, getting these new pieces integrated since the trade deadline.
And all those were great points that you mentioned. I'm trying to think of points outside of that. But, well, first of all, just watching that game against the Jazz, that was like watching a game of NBA Jam. There were so many dunks. And like you said, getting in the paint. and using their bigs, because obviously you just mentioned Luka and Kyrie, they get in the paint as well. But using their bigs, exploring their size in the paint is just on another level, and I credit that to Kid. I mean, he's really using their size finally, and now he's choosing moments when to explore Maxi at the 5, like you mentioned, instead of just using him for extended minutes, because
Right.
that also will lead to injuries with Maxi. So I think that's even better that he's using Gafford and Lively, and then using Maxi when he needs to. Um, Not when he wants to. And I think it will only get better down the stretch for this team now that they have a rotation. Like you said, he's limiting THJ's minutes. When he plays good, he plays a lot of minutes. When he plays bad, he plays limited minutes. Hardy had more minutes than him in that Jazz game. Obviously, it was a blowout at times, so that's understandable. But it's showing that he is allowing Hardy to develop in the moments that he needs to develop, because next year you expect Hardy to get a lot of THJ's minutes, or if THJ is here. So it's good to see that he is slowly, patiently using Hardy as a guy who's going to be eventually in the rotation, but he's trying to win. And I think that's a very key for this team, is he's really shoring up a playoff rotation now that Exum is back. It is going to be interesting, like you said, with Josh Green comes back.
Mhm.
How is he going to find his minutes? Because obviously he's going to be at one of the premier guards on this team off the bench with Exum. You expect Hardaway to go down, but it's going to be interesting. But I do give him credit that the after timeouts is really good with
A
Kid.
lot better. Yeah.
A lot better. He's using his timeouts more. The players are also executing, his strategy, which is good. But that's it with Kidd. I mean, this is Jason. This is who he is. Honestly, this is
Mhm.
Jason Kidd. I mean, for him to have success as a head coach, one, his team has to be healthy. And two, his team, he has to have talent. Because he
Yeah.
is a player's coach. Luka wants him. He's one of Kyrie's mentors, and the front office and Dirk wanted him to lead this new era of Mavs. Especially, he's the polar opposite of Rick Carlisle.
Mhm.
They don't want to go back to that Rick Carlisle who's an incredible coach, but he manages the game to the T. Jason Kidd kind of buys in that Phil Jackson coaching strategy of allowing his players to play, allowing
Yep.
his players to learn, and allowing his players to lead, where you just, he is pretty much, just throwing wrinkles into what the Mavericks are trying to do. And I think that does work. I've said it before. You know, he does fall back and get lazy as times as a head coach, but when he's on his game and when the talent is there and the team is healthy, you see him shine and you see his strengths, because he does allow Luka to be Luka, and he allows Kyrie to be Kyrie, and you really don't want to micromanage those type of players.
Yeah. And you have to give him credit, I think, for the lineup change as well. I mean, it's not easy to change your starting lineup that late in the season, and him putting in Derrick Jones Jr. and Daniel Gafford in the starting lineup, and moving Josh Green and
It was
Derek Lively to the
huge.
bench. That's completely changed the trajectory of this team. I mean, now we were talking about a few weeks ago, this team, are they going to make it out of the play-in? Now we're potentially talking about how high can they go in the standings with the Pelicans injury to Brandon Ingram. A huge injury where he's going to be out the next couple of weeks, and their schedule gets pretty brutal. They've got to play Milwaukee and the Thunder and the Suns in the next 2 weeks. You
And they
talk
got
about the
Miami
Clippers.
tonight.
Miami tonight. They're the Clippers who seem to be in somewhat of a free fall as well ever since Westbrook got hurt.
9-9 since All-Star break.
The Suns have trouble in the fourth quarter. The two biggest games of the season, next week in Sacramento. I mean, those going to be it's going to be a really, really, kind of season defining week for the Mavericks. But you've got to give Jason Kidd credit. I know there's a lot of hate that gets thrown around with him because of he doesn't engage with the refs and he doesn't, come to his players' defense. And sure, we're not saying he's a perfect coach by any means, right? But you've got to give him credit where credit is due. To your point, the after timeout plays have been fantastic this year. That's something he's cleaned up a lot since last year.
Best clutch
Making
team in the league.
best clutch team in the league, changing the style of play, um, which the players have bought into, from being a team that just jacks up threes to, hey, our threes aren't working. Let's get the ball inside. Let's get it to Gafford, get it to Lively, let them clear things out. It's been great, and it's working for the Mavericks.
Yeah, now he has the roster to do that. I mean,
Yep.
he has the guys to do that. He has his he has PJ Washington to, really defend. He has Derek Jones Jr. to really defend. And he has Gafford and Lively to rebound. They're a great rebounding team now. And we've seen this team struggle rebounding the ball the last few years. And now they have big men to do that. They have the lob threats. They have the efficiency inside. It's really good to see. It's also scary to see because the Mavs are 7-1 in their last 8 games, and they're barely holding on to the 6th seed in the West. Like you said, it's really a gauntlet. Like, you really have to just watch how other teams and the Mavs do every single day. Like, it's really, like, the Pelicans could lose tonight, then the Mavs are 1 game behind 5th. I mean, the Clippers, like you said, they're really struggling right now. They're 9-9 since All-Star break. But, the teams behind them, the Suns can win and the Mavs could go down to 7th. So it's crazy. And those Kings games are important. Those Kings game are like play-in games. You
And
have to win both of them.
Yeah, both teams are going to be on
at
a
least
back-to-back.
split.
Yeah, both teams are going to be on a back-to-back on Tuesday night. And Dallas has historically struggled in Utah. The elevation, just playing against the Jazz. I think they have 6 wins in franchise history or something like that in Utah, 6-21 or something like that. So that's not an easy task. I mean, Utah is a young team. They're not, obviously we saw them last night here in Dallas. They turned the ball over a lot, and Dallas took advantage of that last night. It's going to be interesting to see with that back-to-back. It's a later game. It's not until, 9:30 our time because of the time difference. It's going to be interesting to see what the lineup looks like against Utah, because if that may be a game where you're not going to see, maybe a Luka or a Gafford, just to get them prepped, maybe get another day off before playing Sacramento, because those 2 Kings games are going to be crucial, because you got to at least tie the season series and win. Like you said, you can split them, but I think you kind of have to go into it thinking you have to win both to at least tie the season series.
Yeah, and you want as many tiebreakers as you can. You already have the Suns, and you're closing in on the Pelicans. You have to win. You have to win both Rockets games.
Yep.
To end the season, and the Rockets are like the hottest team right now.
Yeah.
So that's every single game matters, no matter what the strength of schedule says. Like you said, the Jazz game is going to be hard. This 5-game road trip for the Mavericks? Yeah, 5-game road trip.
Yep.
The Jazz, both Kings, Rockets, and Golden State. You have to win all those games. That's gonna be tough.
It's a tough stretch. I mean, and after that, you kind of, you've got 4 or 5 games after that. But yeah, this is gonna. I mean, the Mavericks, you kind of have to think they got to go 4-5 on this road trip. I mean, 3-5 at worst, I think. And 100% you have to split those games with the Kings. Like, if you lose both of those games, I mean, just you can pretty much lock yourself into the 7th seed, I think, at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they will do good on this road trip because they're actually playing better. Because your mind instantly thinks, gets flashbacks of previous Mavs teams, or even Mavs at the beginning of the season with injuries. You saw collapses with this team, and I think they'll do fine as long as they have their guys. As long as, obviously, Green's not going to be there, but as long as they have the nucleus of those guys, especially Kyrie and Luka, and I just like the dynamic that they have with Derek Jones Jr., PJ Washington, and Exum defensively. It's really good, especially if they start hitting threes. Exum he makes timely threes. He's good at beyond the arc this season. But if Derek Jones Jr. and PJ just find a way to, knock down threes consistently, like you wouldn't even be concerned about this 5-game road trip. Like they would be one of the top
No.
teams in the league.
Yeah, and you would. I think the laws of regression, and you kind of hope they regress to the mean. As the season ends and gets you get into the playoffs, and anything can happen, man. When you make the playoffs, I mean, if the Mavericks catch fire, I mean, who knows how far this team can go, right? And if they don't, if they're in the play-in and it's one bad night, I would have been more concerned if this was the Mavericks of a month ago, 2 months ago, where the threes don't fall and you see them kind of, they suffer on the defensive end and on rebounding and in transition, but they've turned it around these last 10 games. You can see a different Mavs team. You can see a joy, of the teammates, everyone playing together. You can tell that they all trust each other. They're understanding their roles and especially Gafford and Washington being, new to the team, they're understanding what's being asked of them. And I think that makes Dallas definitely dangerous. I mean, I'm not making any finals picks here, but I'm just saying, like, anything can happen. I mean, this team, if they play the way that they are, that's great. And you brought up injuries. We've been talking about it. Kevin Huerter out for the Kings. That's a big loss for them too. It's a huge bench piece for them. He's been playing well. So that's another loss for Sacramento. So Mavericks have a chance here, Landon. I mean, this is going to be a really critical week. A really critical stretch of games for them starting Monday night against Utah.
Yeah, and you think about not only the injuries going on. Obviously, you just mentioned the Kings. But they're struggling right now. And did you see Malik Monk just walk to the back at the end of the game frustrated? Like that team is like they're in desperation of a big win. And I think that's why the Mavericks, they really have to keen in on starting hot against the Kings. I mean, we do have to mention the Jazz before that. We can't overlook the Jazz because they're going to be coming hot too, because they just lost bad to the Mavs, and it kind of gave Will Hardy flashbacks of the last time the Jazz. We know what he said post game. Yep. And well, this post game, he said Jason Kidd's doing a great job, but that's those Kings games. We already mentioned how pivotal it is for this team to win both games, not only one of those games, but both games. But you have to do something different in those games, and I think that's where you're gonna have to start hitting your threes, or someone else outside of Luka or Kyrie is gonna have to have a big game, and I think that's where you start to see, because THJ is struggling, and he's the guy that hits the threes. So someone else has to step up with the threes, or you're going to have another big night from your bigs, because that's pretty much your third option right now is a Gafford and Lively combo.
Yeah, I think they're going to be the most important, because you're talking about going up against a guy in Sabonis who rebounds the ball incredibly well, right? Offensively and defensively. So
he's the most underrated player right now.
Yeah, he's their best player. I mean, De'Aaron Fox is a heck of a player as well, but I think that team feeds and runs through Sabonis. And so, the Mavericks, we saw them against the Kings earlier when they didn't have, the kind of interior presence they do now. I think it's going to be really interesting to see when you can kind of interchange Gafford and Lively against Sabonis. Can that kind of offset some of the rebounding, and you take some of those second chance opportunities away from Sacramento.
Yeah, and I really want to state how good of a season Sabonis is. He's really scary. It's just his style of play. He's kind of like a rugby player. He's very physical out there, but if you just look at his stats, I mean, the eye test matches it, but his stats alone, 20 points a game, 13.7 rebounds, 8.3 assists, 60 point. That's what I'm saying. 60.9 field goal percentage, 41.1 3-point percentage. This guy is a beast.
Super underrated. And
He
Sacramento's a
wasn't
good,
an all-star.
which is
That's
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah, I
He
I
should be
I
all
love.
NBA.
That's one of those trades that very rarely do trades work out for both teams, but the Halliburton for Sabonis swap has worked out great for both. It's cool to see. Um, trades like that kind of work out for both teams, and there's no regrets looking back on it. So I just a funny stat, funny memory of when those two were swapped, and everyone was kind of like, okay, yeah, kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely a win-win trade, and I feel like they always are like on the opposite spectrum of who's doing good. Like, at the
Yeah,
beginning of the season, it was all about Halliburton, but the second half of the season, Halliburton has regressed, and Sabonis is playing outstanding. So,
maybe
I mean,
Halliburton needs
it's
to
just a
play the Mavs.
win-win.
Maybe Halliburton just needs to play against Dallas again to get his shot back and get the Pacers back to winning.
Or get in the in-season tournament.
Man, we just
One
can't
of the
play
two
against the Pacers. I don't know why. I don't know what it is.
is crazy. But the good thing, like we mentioned in the past, the Western Conference and just the teams that they're playing don't have really stretch bigs,
Yeah.
which is why we're seeing success from this team. It is crazy. Like there's only 12 games left of the Mavs.
Mm-hmm.
I believe 12 games. These 12 games are like March Madness. I mean, it's crazy to think the season is about to end, and the Mavs could be. You never know. The Mavs could be as high as 4th seed, or they could be as low as 8th seed going into the play-in on the road.
Yeah.
This is, I can't remember a season like this. This is incredible, but also it's a circus.
It's good basketball. If you're a basketball
That's
fan,
what I'm
it's great.
saying. Yeah,
It's awesome to see. I mean, I think it shows you the level of parity. You see young teams like OKC really kind of maybe a year or two early, and they're kind of at the top of the standings. Obviously you've got the Nuggets, the Wolves, and kind of the emergence of Anthony Edwards. I think that's always fun to see. He's a fun player to watch. And then you've got the old timers, and the fact that the play-in tournament potentially could be Luka Dončić, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and Steph Curry is mind blowing. Like that's going to be. I mean, you talk about ratings for the NBA. I mean, that's a gold mine for them. To have that as your play-in game, as your one and done. If it's Warriors Lakers, I mean, can you imagine the ratings for that game? In a couple of weeks, which it looks like it's going to be, unless Houston somehow pulls something miraculous and kind of flies past Golden State.
yeah,
But it's great because it's not just we were in kind of a decade period where it was literally just Cavs Warriors every year. And it gets boring because it's like, what's the point? And now you're starting
yeah,
to see every year there's a different team emerge. Who thought Miami would make the finals last year as an 8 seed?
yeah.
It's like all these teams record wise, sure, there's difference, but a lot of these teams match up really well against each other. And so I think it makes for a great playoff, and it shows kind of where the league is now, from a growth perspective. And I think it's great. It's especially if you're a basketball fan. I mean, these playoffs are going to be fantastic to watch.
It really is, and it's also a, a testament to the new CBA changes. Like it's hard to
Mm-hmm.
be a team with a big three. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of big twos or a one with a great supporting cast. And that's what basketball should be. That big three era was, like you said, Cavs and the Warriors, or LeBron's Heat. It's just a lot of big threes. And now you're really seeing the parity around the league. In the play-in, you give more teams chances to actually play good instead of tank. So it's really incredible to watch. And it's going to be nerve-wracking for all the teams in the play-in, or even the last 2 weeks of the season is going to be nerve-wracking because
Yeah.
every single game counts now. Yes, because you look at the standings every morning, teams are switching around like crazy. But those last 2 weeks, it's going to be pure cinema. Like you're going to have to
Yeah.
bring popcorn watching each game because it's going to be crazy. Like you said, the Pelicans, they could go on a meltdown for the second straight year, at the end of the season. That would be horrible. Anything can happen right now.
Yeah, and injury. I mean, it's unfortunate because I know how much you love Brandon Ingram.
I
It's unfortunate
know.
that he's out. Because that's. I mean, and the Pelicans are a great story again. We talk about Oklahoma City. With
Zion's
Zion
playing good too.
healthy, Zion's playing amazing, and it's that
Yes.
the Pelicans are a scary team as well. When you look at kind of their combination of what they've got, you've got a veteran, with a veteran guy like McCollum, and the emergence of Zion, and then
Herb Jones.
Herb Jones and Trey Murphy. I mean,
Trey, yeah, I like him.
you've got a really, really good team that potentially could be on the cusp of something great. But with Brandon Ingram out, if you're the Mavericks now,
that's tough.
You just got to take advantage of, you went through your injury history. Thankfully Daniel Gafford's okay after what looked like a scary injury last night. Losing Josh Green, it sucks because he was playing well off the bench, but at least now you have depth, and at least now you're healthy in every other part of, on the rest of your roster. And so if you're the Mavericks, you've got to take advantage of this. And every loss that the Pelicans, the Kings, the Clippers, the Suns, every time they lose, you've got to look at that as an opportunity to gain a little bit more ground and make sure that you're out of the play-in. Because, I mean, you never know in the play-in, right? We saw it last year. You never know what could happen.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. Especially you've mentioned the Pelicans, the Suns, the Kings. All their schedules are tough, and the Mavs, they just got to take care of business. They truly are the owners and the creators of their own destiny. Like, it's
Absolutely.
cliche to say, but they really are. If they just take care of business, I mean, they only have like a couple of difficult games for the rest of the season. Like, predominantly most of them, just going by record, they have a better record than predominantly all of them. So they just got to take care of business and stay healthy. But the last topic for this show, Luka's MVP campaign resumes. Shahnavaz, it resumes. It's back. And tomorrow it might not be back. So
who knows? Who knows?
The MVP ladder just came out, and Luka moved up from fourth to a tie with Giannis for third, and obviously Jokic and Shea are the top two. They've been the top two. So I want to ask you, Shahnavaz, what has to happen? Because we're in a time crunch here where we don't have a lot of games. First of all, he has to play 65 games, so we're only a few away. But what has to happen for Luka to win the MVP, and what's your thoughts on the MVP race?
What has to happen for Luka to win the MVP this year is a time machine to go back and change some of the outcomes of these games, because I don't think he's going to win it. Unfortunately, I mean, even as well as the Mavs are playing now, and if they finish the season, let's say they go on a crazy run.
Left.
Yeah, I just don't think there's enough. Not that much time left. I think there's. And look, if the Mavericks finish in the 5 seed, if they somehow move from 7th, 8th to 5th, so by the end of the year, he should at least finish second.
We just talked about the schedules.
Yeah, I mean, he should at least finish second in my mind. But Shea, I get the love affair with Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and he's a great player. But man, like, you put Luka on that team loses what, maybe 10 games all year? Like, that roster's stacked. Like, Sam Presti's done a phenomenal job building that team.
Yeah.
It's a great roster. So obviously Shea's averaging 31 a game and is effective. But we've talked about it. Half the dude's points come from the foul line. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. But I think, you take into account that Oklahoma City's young. You take into account that he's kind of the de facto leader of that team, and they're in the 2nd seed, vying for the 1st seed. It's going to go, I think I get why there's bias towards him. But look, if you're the Nuggets and you're 11-2 since the All-Star break, and, the way that they've been playing, and if they just keep rolling, I don't see how you don't give it to Nikola Jokic. I mean, he's the best player in the league. If they move their way up from 3-1, and just end this crazy second part of the season on a massive run and go up to the top seed, I don't think there's anything anybody can do about it at that point. So would I love to see Luka get it? Yes, I do. Will he finish top 3? I think now it's I think if the Mavericks keep winning, I think it's a certainty that he finishes at least top 3, if not top 2. But I don't think there's any way for him to win it now with only 12 games left, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, honestly. But, there is 12 games left, and I feel like if he goes on a run here, and the Mavs as a whole go on a run in these last 12 games, just like Embiid won his. I mean, they went on a run at the end of the season, and he really took over from Jokic. I feel like if the Mavs can go on a run, and then you see other teams fall ahead of them, like the Pelicans. We just mentioned the schedule that they have in the big injury. I feel like there's a big chance. I feel like you'll start because you saw it when the Mavs were on that win streak.
Mm-hmm.
There was a narrative, like you saw national media narrative starting to talk about the Mavs. And I feel like if you go on a big run to end the season, and not only that, Luka gets a back-to-back player of the month. Like you have to win these next few games because I think they're like 7. What are they right now? In the month of March, what are they? Let's see. In the month of March, the Mavs are 7-4. 7-4.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say they split 9-6. No, you got to get 10-5, get player of the month. So if you go 3-1 in these next 4 games.
Yeah, which I think we said is kind of ideal, right? When you're talking against Utah,
Jazz, Kings, Rockets.
And Rockets. Yeah, you've got to win 3 out of 4.
So back-to-back player of the month. It's not Shea. So he has to be moving up.
It's not. And again, I think Luka moves up, but unless Denver starts falling here and Jokic,
that's
kind
the
of
tough one.
I don't know how you don't give it to him. Like the way that they've played since the All-Star break, they've been, and I know people talk about Boston, and Boston's played great as well, but Tatum's not an MVP candidate. Nikola Jokic is 100% an MVP candidate, and if they keep rolling the way that they have been, I have no problem with him winning the award. I would have an issue if the Nuggets if the Nuggets somehow lost 8 of their last 9, Jokic just is awful, and they somehow give the award to Shea, I'll have a problem. Because then Luka has a legitimate argument to say, no, it's mine. And the Mavericks finish, as well as you're saying that they will, then yes, then there's a legitimate gripe to be had. But if the Nuggets keep playing like this, I don't know how you don't give it to Jokic again.
Yeah, it's gonna. That's what I'm saying. It's gonna be. I'm trying to see the scenario where I'm trying to build this case because you can have. Oops. Hold on. You can have. There 12 games left. Let's say they go 9-3. You reach 50 games. You get 5th seed. And Luka's stats across the board. I mean, 34, 10, and 9. And you're shooting 48%, 37 from 3. That's historical great numbers.
Yeah.
And the injuries that the Mavs face. That's why I'm so tired of the MVP heavily voted on wins. Because it's an individual award. And look, Jokic he deserves it.
He 100% does. And you look at the remaining schedule. I mean, the Nuggets unfortunately don't, have a pretty, I wouldn't say cakewalk, but they've got a pretty easy schedule. I mean, they do have games against the Suns, the Wolves, which is going to be a huge game, the Clippers, actually 2 against the Wolves. So that, that's going to be good. But the Thunder, look, Luka could move up to 2, man. The Thunder still have to play Milwaukee.
Yeah.
They've got to play New Orleans, the Suns, the Knicks, the Celtics, the Kings, the Bucks, and and then they finish the season against Dallas. And so there's an opportunity there. You're right. There's a very small chance that if the Mavericks just go on this insane run, the Nuggets just I mean, it's got to be the worst stretch of Jokic's career. These next 10, 12 games. I mean, and Luka's just got to average like
You
40.
can't
And
fault the Mavericks for having injuries because
no,
Luka
I
was
mean, it should
keeping
be
this
his
team.
stats. Like, it should be stats. If Jokic can win it and Westbrook can win it when they're the 6th seed, then Luka should legitimately be, in the top of the conversation based on statistics. But we know whatever the media hate is against Luka, and for some reason this year that they're hyping up Shea and they're hyping up Tatum and Edwards. It's fine, Luka. I mean,
Yeah,
use that as motivation in the playoffs. Then go beat Oklahoma
yeah.
City when you play and show, hey, look, I was the MVP, right? You want to say this, this guy across from me, finished higher than me. Watch this.
I will say this. I'll leave the podcast on this. He has a chance, which is a good thing. That's all you want at this point in the season.
Yep.
And the Mavericks are winning. I think he even says it. He cares more about the wins. He says MVP the MVP would be nice, but he cares about winning. So the Mavericks are winning. That's what boils down to. But if Jokic gets 3 MVPs and 1 final MVP, we need to talk about his legacy because that dude is cold, and he deserves a lot of credit historically, not just in the modern day era. Like
Is he
3
the best
MVP
European player ever? Is he
finals.
the best international player ever? Is he top 10 all time? I mean, you got to start having those conversations at that point.
You got to have that. All right, well, make sure y'all subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and you see the usernames. So follow us on social and keep this train going, Mavericks. Keep this winning train going. We'll see where they're at next week. Goodbye.